This is the Montana Outdoor Podcast, brought to you in part by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. And by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. Now, get ready for more fascinating topics and the most interesting people you will ever find in Montana's great outdoors. We offer new podcasts most every Saturday. You can get a link to these podcasts by going to our website, montanooutdoor.com, or by going to our Facebook page, or just send an email to downrigger at montanooutdoor.com and say send a link to my email. It's that simple. Now let's head out with your host, Downrigger Dale, and see what's going on in Montana's great outdoors.
Hello, everyone. It's Downrigger Dale with another Montana Outdoor Podcast. With me, of course, is the captain of the Montana Outdoor Radio Show. He's all the way over in Fort Peck. Got a couple guests that we're going to talk to in a second. And we're going to talk about a favorite subject for fishermen, especially those heading to Fort Peck in usually towards late July or so, when the big king salmon get to running out there. Once you catch one, we call it blackjaw fever. When blackjaw fever sets in with the captain and I, we fish together a lot, and I'll tell you what, it's all we can think about for a few months out of every year.
People always ask me, Captain, how do those salmon get into Fort Peck Reservoir? Well, we have the man who's going to tell us that. It's Heath Headley.
Yeah,
who's the fish biologist.
Yeah, we always get that. We always get that question. Sorry to jump in there, Captain, but we always get that question of, one is, are you sure you're talking king salmon? Is there really king salmon in there? Then how did they get it? And then, of course, the big one, even this time of year, is, well, how's the salmon fishing going to be this summer? So that's hopefully we get all those questions answered. Heath Headley is here, and who else you have sitting there with you over in Fort Peck?
Actually, when they asked Downrigger, is it really true you can catch the king salmon? He goes, yeah, buy me another beer. I'll tell you a little bit more about it.
Yeah, just fill that glass up and, yeah.
Another very good a friend of mine, a real close friend of mine, is Wade Garretts, who is the Fort Peck Fish Hatchery manager. And so he's got a heck of a job, because that we'll find out more about it. But not only salmon in that hatchery, but there's walleye, there's northern.
Yeah,
I think northern pike, and we'll find out what other species. But they stock not only Fort Peck, but they stock lakes all across the state of Montana. Not with the Chinook salmon. It's a special Chinook salmon, and it takes a special way to get that. So I think we should probably ask Heath, first of all. Thanks for joining us, Heath. We appreciate it. How did salmon get into Fort Peck Reservoir?
So they were first stocked in 1983, and those fish actually came from the Dakotas. They started Chinook salmon fisheries over there in their big reservoirs like Sakakawea and Oahe. And, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks back at that time, they were kind of like, it looks like it could amount to something. It's a big body of water. And interestingly enough, though, right during that time, Cisco hadn't been stocked, but shortly thereafter, 1984, 85, and 86, Cisco were stocked for that 3-year period. And lo and behold, their numbers really took off. And obviously, like I said, it's a big body of water, and it's what you would call a 2-story fishery. So during the summer months, it has a warm layer up above and then a cold layer below, where trout and salmon can grow and survive, essentially, and Cisco as well. And so, starting in 83 and years, right after that, Chinook stockings were occurring, and they were relatively small in numbers at that time. Again, trying to make sure the Cisco population was starting to grow and there's going to be enough out there for them to eat, along with the walleyes and pike that were out there too.
So when you say 2-story, are you talking about the cold and the warm water?
Correct. Yep. Yep. Like I say, that warm water up top, you have a thermocline, which is where that transition occurs, and then you have cold water down below. And, with your gadgets, you're out there in the summertime, you're looking for kind of typically a nice cold water break to find those Chinook salmon.
Yeah, it's interesting because they do sell a gadget that you can put down, and it gives you every 5 feet or every 10 feet, it gives you a different water temperature. And it seems like the salmon like that in the 50-degree water temperature. So when your surface water temperature is like 70 degrees, that 50-degree water temperature fluctuates up and down depending upon the time of the summer. And, if it's real hot, it starts fluctuating quite a bit. And it doesn't necessarily mean those salmon are going to bite in that, but it does give them some place to live and prosper. Now, we're talking about a fish, a salmon that is 4 years old. And then they die, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And typically it's, 4-year-old fish out there, the bigger mature fish, but there's a combination of 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds out there, a little bit on the smaller scale as well at any given time.
And the what I'm driving at, though, is that those Cisco, that's why they were so important when they stocked it in the reservoir, because for those salmon to grow that big, and Fort Peck is not the only reservoir in the Missouri River system that has salmon. Sakakawea has salmon.
Yep.
And so does Oahe.
Yep.
But those salmon aren't as big as the ones in Fort Peck.
Correct. Typically, they're a little bit on the smaller size. They still get some nice ones here and there, but a lot of that has to do with kind of what you were alluding to is the prey base. And in our case up here in Fort Peck, it's all Cisco. You get down in the Dakotas, Sakakawea, Oahe, it's a little more rainbow smelt. They do have a few Cisco at certain times. Over the years, it fluctuates, but predominantly rainbow smelt.
And so they're feeding year-round. One of the things that I've always, it's been a mystery to me, is why don't more people catch those salmon year-round? Because to grow that big, they have to be feeding every day. I mean, you're talking about a fish that from day one is a little dink, a minnow, and then all of a sudden, 4 years later, it could be 32 pounds. Why can't you catch those things year-round? I mean, Don and Becky Wilkins, that was an anomaly when they caught those two. There's people fishing for lake trout, or is it because people aren't targeting the salmon?
That's what I was going to get to. It's, a little bit more targeting. And, I mean, it's a big reservoir system. During, the winter time like this, the water's cold. Those salmon can be anywhere. They could be all the way up, Hell Creek area, swimming around, eating Cisco up there. But even we get into spring, early summer, those salmon are still spread out. So, there's a lot of water to cover and try and find them. But it is interesting. You've fished here now for quite a while, and it's like it seems like more guys are trying to start maybe a little bit earlier. And I think that's a good thing because even though these salmon start to migrate back towards August, we typically see a decrease in catch rates out there come August time. And a lot of that has to go back to that Cisco abundance type thing.
Okay, so you have salmon and Chinook salmon in Fort Peck.
Mm-hmm.
You want to keep the reproduction aspect going. How do you get the salmon when they don't have a natural reproduction environment in Fort Peck? How do you get them to reproduce? What do you do on your end being the fish biologist on the lake?
That's a great question.
Well, first of all, Heath plays some real romantic music. Get some candlelight going.
I forgot Downrigger was on there for a minute. We were having such a great conversation, Heath.
Yes, it's all about setting the stage.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist there.
No. It's good that you point out. I mean, if we didn't go out there and put forth an effort in terms of collecting these fish, spawning them, there wouldn't be a Chinook salmon fishery out there. But what we do is, typically end of September, 1st of October, when those water temperatures start cooling down, those salmon will start to kind of come back into some of these bays, these areas where we release these fish. And that's where we go out with a boat, electrofishing boat, and, cruise these shorelines, bays, looking for fish and sending out electrical current just to stun them for a brief moment, net them, and then sort through them, see what we have, males, females, their condition. Typically early on when it's temperatures are still warm, those females aren't releasing their eggs yet. They have to have that ideal temperature where they start to release them. We call those females ripe, and then that's when that spawning process can take place.
Okay, so what you're doing is you're going around there. Now, downriggers want to be on that boat. I don't know how many years he's begged you to be on it.
I've just wanted to borrow it for a while,
And they said for liability issues, rigger couldn't be on there. I was hoping that I was going to try to get him to sign a release for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, that he actually could be on the boat for liability reasons. So maybe we wouldn't have to deal with downrigger anymore.
The only thing they've ever offered is for me to swim alongside the boat, which sounded very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think they just wanted to see if they could actually electroshock a whale.
So anyway, these salmon go into these bays, and they go back, oddly enough, I shouldn't say oddly enough, they go back where you put them in. Isn't that interesting? I mean, they'll go back to, and usually you put them in at a boat ramp because that's the easiest access.
Yep.
And so they go right back to that same boat ramp. You might put some in Duck Creek. You might put some at the marina.
Mm-hmm.
You might put some at Flathead, or Flat Lake, rather. You might put some at, where's that, the Pines, or Rock Creek.
Yep.
And they actually go back there.
They do, yeah. And sometimes they do have a tendency to stray. Obviously, like we kind of talked about, big body of water. We don't have those small creeks and water constantly flowing. So it's a little bit tricky for those fish to imprint on, an exact specific spot. But shoot, even like in the fall, I mean, those fish will show up along the face of the dam there, just going back and forth through those rocks, even though, we didn't stock them there, but we stocked them Flat Lake and Marina.
Much like downrigger when he's going from the Fort Peck Marina bar to the gateway to the Park Grove bar. He's supposed to be home, but he strays quite a bit.
Straying, that is the term.
Okay. Now, when I was fishing for salmon up in Alaska, Heath, they always say that the salmon will come back to wherever they were hatched. Now, of course, they're not being hatched in Fort Peck, but is that why they're coming back to the boat ramp or wherever you introduced them? Is that why they're doing that? Is just an instinct type of thing?
Yeah, it's some instinct type thing, and it's kind of interesting that you bring that up, and I'll go into further detail because we talk with North and South Dakota fish staff, and we joke about it, but we say that they return to their concrete natal area, and typically these boat ramps have concrete on them,
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, and Wade will probably talk about it a little bit, but these fish are raised in, concrete raceways for a good portion, several months. And it's like, oh, this looks familiar, so I think we're going to hang out here for a little while.
A little fish biologist humor.
Yeah.
They just laugh and laugh and laugh every time they get together about some of those neat little jokes that they pass on to each other. Only they would get the punchline, of course. So anyway, you get the salmon in there, you shock them. Well, I tell you what a life they lead. They go out there for 4 years, they eat like pigs, and then they come back, and there's not a lot of good news for them once they hit those bays again.
Yeah, it's kind of all downhill from there.
So what you do is you get the eggs out of the females, but sometimes if they're not ripe, you'll put them into like a big aquarium, and then you wait for them to get ripe.
Yeah, so like I say, we'll go out with that boat. We'll actually meet the hatchery guys. They'll have a hauling truck to transport them back out to the hatchery. And I don't know if I just kind of maybe kick it over to Wade at this point.
So you're running the podcast now. Is that where you're
Somebody needs to, for crying out loud.
Yeah, getting a little off track. Wade, so you take those fish.
Reintroduce your
do?
guests there, Captain, would you? Just in case people just joined us.
All right, you cut out there a little bit, Rigger.
Reintroduce your guests for us, would you?
Okay. All right. We're talking to Heath Hadley, who's a fish biologist on Fort Peck Reservoir, and we're talking Chinook salmon. And now we're going to the hatchery. The hatchery man who handles the whole Fort Peck fish hatchery is Wade Garrett. And Wade, you take those fish from Heath, you do a handoff. What happens then with those salmon?
Like you said, yeah, we'll put them in the pickup or the truck. We'll have a large hauling tank on our pick trucks, and then we bring them back to the hatchery. We have them separated on the truck from male or female, so we know which ones go into which one of the big raceways down there. We basically utilize 2 of the raceways and put the females in one side, the males in the other, and we basically, some of them are ripe right away. Other ones aren't. So we go through them basically on a daily basis, basically squeezing their abdomen, and if they're releasing eggs, they're completely ripe. We'll put those into another little holding pen there and turn around and spawn them that day when they're there. So that's just kind of the start of it.
So when you're talking about doing all this, there's got to be some delicacy that goes with the process, or else you could ruin the eggs that you're collecting.
Yeah, if you squeeze too hard, you can, basically crush the eggs and everything. So just a real, when those females are ready to go, just a real light touch on their upper abdomen, and they'll release eggs. And we'll set them over real nicely over the other side, and we'll collect them when we get ready to spawn them.
And so you get from the males. What do you do with them?
The males are the same way. They're in another raceway, and then when we use those, all we're doing is trying to get what we call the milt, which is the male sperm out. We'll collect that in groups of, usually take about 8 males, put them all into a tub, and we'll use that squirt. It's a squirt bottle basically, and we'll use that squirt bottle and squirt those on the eggs, and that's how the fertilization process starts when we go through each female.
Okay, but do you have to keep this milk in a certain temperature, or
we're basically going through that whole squeeze bottle of milk within probably 8 to 10 of the females, if not less than that, depending on how many eggs we get out of each female.
So how many males does it take to handle a female's eggs?
We basically will put them all together into that, 8 of them into that tube, and we'll use a mixture of those 8 all shook up. So we're basically putting 8 males onto 1 female.
What do you do with the salmon after they've given you their eggs, given you their milk? What happens to those salmon?
Well, salmon, at that time they die. They're basically dead. Going back to Heath, they take out the otolith in them for aging structures. They'll take lengths and weights of them. We'll use them, get the eggs out, and basically what we do every day that we spawn is we've got basically a UTV that we've got ice on, and we put them on ice. At the end of the day, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we have people show up out in front of the visitor center to collect those basically carcasses of those salmon and take them home and use them.
And they come out. You've never had to throw any away.
Just to jump in there for a second, guys, just to clarify. So if people aren't familiar with salmon, what you're saying is that they don't die just because you guys are done with them. They're going to die anyway, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
There's not a lot like the trout species where we can reuse a trout year after year for so many years.
We're going to take a quick break and talk about one of our favorite businesses in Montana, Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. Captain, you've been getting lots of folks asking about your dump trailer that you got from Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. What's up with that? Tell us about what you got from them.
Well, you know what I do, Downrigger, is I get them when they ask me about the dump trailer. I usually have a project that I haven't done, I've been putting off. And so I go, well, I'll show you how this works, but you got to go fill it up first. And I said, you
do
go
a little
fill
Tom
it up.
Sawyer on them, yeah.
You go fill it up, and I'll show you how it works. And that's what they do. No, seriously, those dump trailers, you either have a dump truck or you have a dump trailer. Now, a dump trailer is a lot less expensive, a lot more, I shouldn't say more versatile, but it's really comes in handy for a lot of projects, and they come in many different sizes. And the Diamond C trailer, dump trailer, is one of the premier dump trailers in the industry. And Josh at Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer has been doing an excellent job of providing those dump trailers for folks throughout Montana and actually beyond. He also does business in Washington and Idaho. He's located in Missoula. And if you go on rmtte.com, you can find out the different sizes and get the contact information for Josh, that family-run business on Expressway in Missoula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they've got some great equipment trailers. Whether you're hauling around your side-by-side or, lawn tractor or even on up to some of your bigger equipment. I mean, they just really have what you're looking for. That Diamond C is incredible. We've seen a lot of folks really love those CM truck beds, which if that's what you're looking for, go check those out. But the list goes on and on. So I really hope you folks will check it out. Captain's been awful happy with his and also his gooseneck trailer hitch. So again, rmtte.com, or you can see Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. They're at 5680 Expressway in Missoula, or you can call them 406-549-4243. Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer. You're listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. Got the captain of the Montana Outdoor Radio Show, along with Heath Headley, a fish biologist, as well as Wade Garrett's, the hatchery manager there in Fort Peck. Now, guys, have you heard of any kind of economic study just to find out what the economic impact is? Heath, has anyone ever done that to say, okay, what do these salmon really bring to the area? Because it's got to be huge, I would think. I mean, when I go there, it's unbelievable how many people show up at Fort Peck just because those salmon are running.
You're right. It's pretty amazing, really. So two things on that, and it's your timing is actually pretty gosh darn spot on. However, the numbers haven't been crunched yet, Dale. Just got an email looking at some of the numbers, expenditures like you talked about. So I don't have that with me, but just to elaborate a little bit, like you take the month of August, for example, and I was looking at 2021 Creel survey data, and it was actually impressive that more anglers were putting more hours in targeting Chinook salmon than they were walleye just during that month.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I wouldn't have thought it was that big. Wow.
I believe that. In fact, if you don't get out there on a weekend, like on a Saturday or a Sunday, and putting your boat in the water, you're going to be waiting a little bit to put your boat in the water because there's a lot of guys and gals that are going to be out there doing some fishing. Maybe we should talk about some numbers, some fish numbers, Downrigger. Would you like to hear some numbers?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, one of the things I know that's got to be on, well, it's on my mind, and it's got to be on all our listeners' minds right now, which is what is the forecast looking like for this salmon season coming up this summer?
Let's go with Heath first to find out how many eggs they actually got out of those salmon, and then we'll turn it over to Wade, who is the man that's going to produce the salmon.
Sure. So last year's fall collection efforts was pretty gosh darn good. It was like our third best on record, and we collected 785,000 eggs roughly from just under 200 females.
Okay, 785,000 eggs. Now let's throw it over to Wade. Let's ask Wade how many of those 785,000 are going to be in the water come this year.
Well, it's a good time that we had this now because we actually just finished inventorying what we call from our green eggs to our eyed eggs, which is the visible eye to when they hatch. And that number right now is right at about 290,000 fish that have already hatched out.
Okay. So 290,000, is that what we're going to get into the lake, or is it going to be possibly more?
That'll be actually, that's the max. We'll lose some through just complete, some of those fish won't eat at the hatchery and they won't grow, but that could be anywhere from a couple percent is about all we usually see once they don't, that they don't take on the feed. So
what's the most salmon you've ever planted in 1 year in Fort Peck Reservoir?
Let's go back and make sure I got this right. It was an 18. 19. It was okay. It was been in the fall, spring of 19. We stocked like 548,000 into the reservoir.
All right, 2019. Now let's count it off. when you say 2019, you're talking about in June, correct?
Yep. We stock them in June.
So in 2020, how old are those salmon? Are they a year old?
They'll be in 2020 in the spring. They'll be a year and a half because we go in 19. They'll be the first year in October. That'll be year one.
Okay, so if you've got
so we might be seeing those this summer. Then, are you thinking?
He's shaking his head no.
That's a biology question. I'll let Heath go back to that one.
Okay.
No, unfortunately not. So, like we were kind of talking about, they were stocked in 2019, correct?
Right.
Okay. Well, actually, you have to back up to when those fish hatched out, and usually that's in December sometime.
Oh, okay.
So when they're stocked out in 19, they're already 6 months old downrigger. And then come that fall, we would count them as 1-year-old fish. And so, unfortunately, with that being said, if you kind of do the math, as muddled as it sounds right now, those fish would have been 4-year-old fish last fall.
Okay, last summer.
Yeah, last summer into October. Yep.
So that's what we were catching. We were catching the bigger ones last summer.
I got a little more information for you on that one.
He's got that information.
Okay, so you're making this as clear as mud. Go ahead, Wade.
That's hatchery work for you. Everything's clear as mud. It is. So basically, what he's getting at is, there's some biological stuff that happened within these last 4 years, since these were 4-year-olds. So every year, like I said, these fish are coming in with whatever number. So to get to basically our 3 and 4-year-olds that would be later on from 19, so it'd be 20, 21, 22. And that's where those numbers are coming from for coming up for this spring or this summer, basically, for everybody to catch. Is what we're seeing.
Make it simple for me. How many are going to be out there this summer from
back?
No, total. How many salmon are going to be in the lake?
Well, more importantly, how many are going to be in our boat?
Yeah, I'll let Heath answer that one.
So I want to back up a little bit and hopefully try and explain this a little bit better. So we thought those fish last summer, going into the fall that we were catching were maybe 4-year-olds. Okay. I'm putting a question mark on that for all of us to set the stage.
As an angler, because you do fish them. You're not talking about as a biologist.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like Wade was saying, so we take the otoliths out of these fish to get a definite age and see how they are. See how old they are.
Okay. So these are the fish that you shock and pull up out of the water.
Yep.
And you're taking the otoliths, which is what part of the fish is that?
It's up in the head, and it's actually basically just a bone. Okay. You hear people talk about ivories and freshwater drum. That's what these are. They're a calcium bone structure, and they have rings on them, just like a tree.
Oh.
And we're able to put them underneath a microscope, see how many rings are there, and lo and behold, that's what age that fish is.
Okay.
So to kind of answer this question about years of stocking, numbers, that sort of thing, those fish last year, a large portion of them were actually 3-year-old fish. They weren't 4-year-old fish. And so with that being said, looking back through some of the numbers, weights, that sort of thing, these were some of the bigger 3-year-olds that we've had in quite a long time.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. You say that they are 3-year-old fish. How big does a 3-year-old fish typically get? Will they get 20 pounds?
And it's a stretch. It can happen, but for the most part, they're going to range from about 10 to 15 pounds. And last year, these were 13.7 for the females is what it was.
Right.
And there was a couple, like I said, there was a couple years prior back where we actually saw some that were averaging 14 pounds, just a little over.
Okay. So the year that the new state record was caught, I can't remember what.
2020.
2020.
Mm-hmm.
There was very few salmon that were caught.
Mm-hmm.
Just big ones.
Yeah.
So why is that? Why? And then, for example, and let me continue with this question, then you can answer it all at once. The next few years, you see these little guys. They're 3 pounds, they're 5 pounds, they're 6 pounds. We call them shakers.
Yep.
And you got to actually release them from the downrigger yourself, and then you pull them in. Why was that year that the big salmon was caught Why is that different than the years the last couple 3 years that we've been fishing this lake?
Really, so going back to that one year, that 2020 is mostly just big fish, there weren't many other age classes out there. And a lot of that has to do with how good their survival, how good the stocking took, and it wasn't taking that well. So, for biological reasons. But now we're seeing, and I know you can, speak from experience this past year. I mean, there was bigger fish, up around 20 pounds. There was fish in the teens caught. And then there were those shakers, 5-pounders.
Yeah.
And so that's telling us that, man, look, these stockings that we're putting out, whether it's numbers, numbers is always a good thing, but forage habitat is really good, so it's allowing them to grow, to survive, and for us to catch them.
Didn't you say in a conversation we had a while back that 1 year you had record Cisco population?
Yeah.
And that has to really do well for every fish species in that lake.
Absolutely. So like we noticed it was in 2020 and 2021, we had two very large year classes of Cisco produced back to back. And so what that's meaning is, once those salmon go out the door and stocked into the reservoir, and if they're at a good enough size, which Wade and the crew do a tremendous amount of raising those fish, they're actually able to get on those Cisco that hatch out in the springtime. And then not only that, but it serves as a buffer, so the pike have Cisco to eat, and they're not feeding all on the salmon, plus the walleye aren't feeding all on them, or the lake trout or the smallmouth. There's just a lot more food to kind of, keep the predators at bay, so to speak.
So Wade, are you in charge of planting the salmon in the lake?
Yes.
Tell us how that process works.
It's very similar to how we collect them. We actually raise them out throughout the whole spring, and we'll sample them every couple of weeks to figure out their size, make sure they're getting fed the right amount so that they grow.
What do you feed them?
It's basically a processed fish food, similar to like you feed your goldfish.
Could you get any of that from the hatchery, possibly? Maybe like a couple 50-pound bags?
Actually, you're not the only one that's asked that question, And no, we don't give out the feed to everybody, but yeah, like we've been asked that question quite a bit. But as these fish grow, that fish food gets different sizes. It gets bigger and bigger as they grow, of course. And as they process and use it, they grow and use it to basically get to the size that we want in June when we stock them. It's more the biological part of that is in June, stuff starting to produce in the lake. And like Heath was saying, you got those young of the year, those smaller Cisco there. Plus your phytoplankton and everything is out there, which the salmon use at that size. And we're trying to get them out as big as we can. And we found that if we can get them to 5 inches by June, they do pretty well out there. There's a lot less mouse out there for them to feed.
But you don't just go in and dump them all at one time.
No.
You spread it out. And why do you spread it out? What determines where you spread it out? Why do you do it that way?
Basically, what we're trying to do is evenly split them out between the three main boat ramps, between Duck Creek, the marina, and Flat Lake, if we can get into Flat Lake if it's not down. If not, we'll just try to stock the majority of them at the marina and Duck Creek so that they can have more dispersal rate to get out farther into that reservoir and not congregate basically the predators on them in those spots.
Okay, so 1 year we actually had a lot of water. The spillway was operating. You guys planted salmon at Flat Lake boat ramp that year.
We did not.
You did not. And why is that?
Because of the spillway. We didn't want them getting flushed down the spillway, so we couldn't so people wouldn't be able to utilize them. So those, as Heath was saying before, that's when we were actually stocking them at the Pines and down at Rock Creek because they were farther away from the spillway, hoping that they wouldn't make it to the spillway and go down the spillway and not be able to utilize them up here in the reservoir.
So when that happened, when the spillway there was a lot of water running down there, and guys would go down there and they would catch some big walleyes that had actually went through the spillway, but they're also catching salmon. Yep. Can a salmon survive on the Missouri River below the dam?
In certain areas where that colder water is, they can.
Really?
Yep.
Year round?
Year round.
Yeah, because This is Downrigger here. When I've been fishing down on the river a few times, I know I've seen salmon. I mean, there's nothing that could be that big, other than a pike, but you can kind of tell when you're looking through the water, what kind of fish. So, are you saying that it is possible to maybe catch some of these salmon that do go over the spillway?
I guess you could probably catch them. People are down there, they catch some trout down there. There's a good trout population down there with some nice rainbows in there. But yeah,
I hear some people say, well, those salmon get flushed in there in the river, and because they're in the river now they can breed. So there's a breeding population of salmon in the river. Is that true?
I would say probably not. No,
I wouldn't think so. Okay.
Because you have to have the right substrate for them to put their eggs on and everything. And we know, up this part towards the dam and everything, yeah, it's pretty cold, clear water. But the farther you get down, you get more into the silt issues and everything and stuff like that.
Well, that kind of brings me to some of the questions that we often get, on the Montana Outdoor Radio Show about this salmon, because it is a very popular thing across the state. And one of our listeners has asked, this comes from Bill from Hardin, and Bill asks, why is it that the salmon cannot breed in Fort Peck?
Yeah, and that's what it goes back to, is there's no real good substrate, no good flowing water. They don't have those ideal environmental conditions like they would back up in the Pacific Northwest, or even the Great Lakes. I don't want to go too much on a tangent here, but there's actually some good habitat in the Great Lakes where they're finding good natural reproduction occurring out there. These nice streams that have constant flowing water, good cobble gravel mix, that sort of thing for them to spawn and reproduce successfully.
I thought you were going to say that the matchmaker Wade is not available at Fort Peck.
So
he has his own little matchmaker bar down there. They call it the Fort Peck Fish Hatchery.
But I have heard that really that there are very few lakes in the world where you plant Chinook salmon and they will naturally breed. I heard that there's like one lake in New Zealand that does it, and so is that true? We will probably never see a breeding population of Chinook in Fort Peck. Is that correct, Heath?
Yeah, more than likely. I hate to say never. Never is a long time, and things change over the course of time. But yeah, more than likely, it would be a tough go.
Okay.
Never say never, Downrigger.
Exactly.
Right. Now the question that we get often with these is, why is it that we don't catch salmon until they get to that 3 or 4 year old? Of course, there is an exception to every rule. We see that, but why is that? What's causing the salmon to only start to bite when they're at their end of life?
Yeah, I guess I would say that. I wouldn't say just biting at 3 and 4. Last year, there was 2-year-old fish being caught, even some smaller ones than that. Fish that were stocked out in June, that were anywhere from 6, 7, 8 inches in size. So, just maybe a little bit of myth there, I would say, Downrigger. And like we talked about earlier, these fish, they're on a mission. They're wanting to get out there. They're wanting to eat. They're wanting to grow. They're wanting to mature, and then that's the end of their life cycle.
It seems like July has been a really good month, especially the latter part of July. And a lot of the small ones will start biting around that time period, but then they're gone for a little bit. Is that just because they're looking for food? They're coming around in the big schools and the way they go?
Yeah, those fish are moving all the time, but the bigger explanation, more than likely, is what our Cisco and what our bait fish population is doing out there. So, once we get right into about that first part of August, those Cisco that hatch out in the springtime, typically it's right after the ice comes off, April, May, roughly. Those Cisco are roughly 4 inches in size. And so all of a sudden, they went from 2-3 inches and now they're 4, and all these predators can start seeing them now and keying in on them more effectively. basically all the catch rates for walleye, for pike, smallmouth, lake trout, salmon, they all kind of take a dip during the month of August, and that has largely to do with the amount of food out there that's suddenly available, if you will.
Okay, Wade, is there anything that the sportsman can do to help the Fort Peck Fish Hatchery produce more fish so we can catch more fish?
Well, the biggest thing is just, enjoy the fishery that's out there that you guys have the availability to have out there. And we'll try, as long as we were getting the fish that come into the hatchery, we're going to try our dangest to get them to produce viable eggs so we get more fish out there for you guys.
Do you ever give any tours of the hatchery?
Tours are available 7 days a week, usually.
Really?
Is that food that you feed those salmon? Is that locked up?
Yes, it is. For the most part, as far as everybody knows, we have it locked up under lock and key.
I see. Okay. We're going to take another quick break. Talk about our friends at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Boy, if you folks are thinking about doing a remodel, or maybe you want to build a new home, I cannot stress enough that you go and see the folks at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Now, you can go online at Superior-Hardwoods and take a look at them there, or you can, obviously go to Missoula and see them. Now, why am I telling you this? Because I just flat don't know where you can find a larger selection. They have the largest selection in the Western United States. And I'm talking about everything from your traditional new wood floors and siding or paneling to reclaimed hardwoods. Captain, you've got a reclaimed hardwood floor in your home in Lewistown. That is a gorgeous hardwood floor. I know a lot of people give you some pretty amazing compliments on that.
Yeah, it's a great floor to have. The one that we have, you don't need to take your shoes off. You enter a house, sometimes you got to take your shoes off. Not here, not at our Lewistown place. And you're always looking at the floor. I mean, I look at that floor more than I've ever looked at a floor, and here's why. Because I go, well, there's like a crack in the flooring. Well, I go over there, and it's really not a crack in the flooring. It's the way the flooring was restructured, remanufactured. It's hardwood floors. They have so many different styles of hardwood floors, and it's so easy to do business with Superior Hardwoods because they know the hardwood floor business. I mean, they have a warehouse that's got 10,000 square feet full of exotic and domestic lumber, and they have 100,000 square feet of flooring in that warehouse. 100,000 square feet. So you can find a floor at superior-hardwoods.com.
Yeah, and don't forget their antique reclaimed timbers and beams, too. For those of you doing a full new construction, wow, those things are incredible to look at. Really give you that great rustic look. It's all right there. That is superior-hardwoods.com. Hope you'll go see them soon. You're going to love it. You can also reach them at 406-235-7452 at Superior Hardwoods of Montana. Gotta love those folks, and of course we really appreciate them sponsoring this podcast. Let's get back to what we were talking about here. Another question that we get quite a bit, and I'll just pull this one up from Ron in Billings, and Ron asks, he has heard that you can't throw a salmon back once you've caught it and touched it. Is that true?
Well, you can do it. However, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of variables involved.
I'm sure what he means is, will it survive?
Right. And that's where I was going with, but thanks for, going into further detail, Dale. I mean, the one thing we have to remember is, especially if you're out there in August, you're more than likely fishing with your downrigger gear, and it's down anywhere in the neighborhood of, let's just say, 50-degree water temperatures. but you catch that fish, fight it for a little while, who knows, bring it up to the surface. And I mean, it's not out of the question for water surface temperatures to be up in the upper 70s. And anytime salmonids have to go through stress like that, warm temperatures, they are good with dealing with that change in pressure, but temperature is a whole nother touchy subject. And yeah, you might release that fish and it might swim away, but that's not to say that several hours or even a day or whatever later, it might expire.
And they don't float up; they just sink to the bottom. Correct?
Typically, yeah, depending on how fast they come up.
So, would you recommend keeping them?
I would.
They're pretty good table fare.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So and this is essentially kind of a put and grow take type fishery. Really, we're putting these fish out there for everybody to use, and hopefully have a good time, catch, and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, gentlemen, coming back to the whole thought of why some people catch salmon and others don't, and this becomes the $1 million question. When we're all out there and we're watching the guy go by us, every half hour or so, and he's always got a fish on, and we're fishing with the same dang thing and not catching it. What is there any thoughts as far as the behavior of a salmon, of why some people catch and why some don't?
I think it's your aftershave, Downrigger.
Could be.
You shouldn't be handling the lures with your aftershave that you wear. And Old Spice, I don't even know where you buy that stuff anymore.
Well, it's usually high karate, but that's a different thing.
Wade, do you have any idea? I mean, you talk to the salmon, you feed the salmon.
We talk to the salmon when we get ready to spawn them. Yes.
What do you say to the salmon?
Just do your job so we can do ours.
Yeah. But
keep us in business.
I've just always found that fascinating, and everybody has these theories as to why. You just have to be in the right place at the right time. Other people say, well, it's a special smelly stuff I put on it or that. But has there ever been any studies, do you know, Heath, of why salmon will bite certain times and not? Or
no, I don't know. I will say though that one thing. There's actually some video out there somewhere, and some of you guys have fish for salmon, you might know about it, but they've actually documented some of these salmon swimming for miles just following a lure and not hitting it, and it's pretty impressive. And so I don't know, I guess that's for us as fishermen, anglers, to always constantly keep tinkering with things, leader length, color, smell, and sometimes we find ourselves down a big rabbit hole where we probably shouldn't have went, but it's I think it's always the interesting thing to keep us, asking questions, talking with other fishermen out there, and, hopefully developing a pattern and becoming a better fisherman.
Some people have it, some people don't.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I've heard is that smell plays a big part with it. In fact, I've read some articles that say that salmon have the best sense of smell of any animal on the planet. And so that really it comes down to, what have you got on your lure and all that for smell or that? What have you heard there as far as?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think probably some of these guys know too. There's some guys who are very meticulous about that, wear gloves whenever they're messing with lures and or bait, just to try and keep any outside, scent off it, if you will. And so, yeah, no, there's probably something to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Captain, what about you as far as, picking the type of lure and when you change out and that sort of thing? What's your rule of thumb there?
Usually just to shut you up, I'll change lures or keep you active.
Yeah.
No, I pretty much stay with the same thing most of the time because I fish with 4 rods. And, if one, it's typical for me, if one is actually producing, I'll stick with that and I won't double up. I learned that from Bill's Rock to the Salmon Slayer. But I will make an exception because I know I had my wife Bernie on the boat and she goes, why don't you put that blackjack on another rod? And I said, well, I told her the story about the Salmon Slayer. We don't double up. And then it catches another one. Well, it ended up that day that the one blackjack that we wanted to duplicate caught the first 4 or 5 fish, and we actually limited out that day. The next 4 or 5 fish were caught by the other blackjack and a different rod. So you tell me, Downrigger.
Yeah. Well, I've spent a lot of hours with you, a lot of real pain in the ass hours. And I'll tell you, if anyone can ever figure this out, let us know, because it a lot of times doesn't make any sense, but that's the way it is. I think that the main thing that if I ever give anybody advice is that you gotta spend the time. You got to spend the time. If you don't get out there and you think it's going to be like catching the walleye when they're biting, you're just going to catch a mess of them. With the salmon, it's all about time. You got to get out there in the morning and stay out there all day. But if you do that, over time, you're going to catch some incredible fish.
And I think a little advice as we get close to wrapping up this podcast is that when you go to the fish hatchery, don't ask Wade all the stupid questions that we asked him when you do see him.
See,
but if you do see some of that food, that salmon food, grab a little bit. And we're right down the street from the hatchery at the headquarters.
Well, I think that we've probably created more questions than we had answers, but that's what we're here for. Downrigger at MontanaOutdoor.com is the email to ask any questions you have. We'll be sure and pass them on to Heath and pass them on to Wade and get your questions answered to the best we can. And also, we always like to hear what you thought of our podcast and what topics you'd like us to cover. So to kind of recap, gentlemen, how do you think the salmon fishing is going to be this summer? We'll start with you, Heath.
You're really putting the pressure on, Dale.
And I'm going to hold you to it.
Of course you are. I mean, I'm pretty gosh darn optimistic. Like we kind of talked about here briefly, just trying to recap. And there's some multiple age groups out there, and that's something we haven't seen in, quite a while. They're growing well. They're eating well. There's a lot of Cisco out there. So, honestly, that's probably going to be one of the biggest challenges for us as fishermen, but I'm optimistic, Dale. And so anything from 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old fish out there.
Wade, how about you?
Well, I'm optimistic too that, for one, that everybody gets a chance to catch those fish that are out there, but we're looking into next fall, hoping that we get a good return on these fish so we can keep this going. If we can keep this going like we have this year into next year and keep adding this group of fish out there with those numbers, we'll be doing all right.
One thing's a little confusing to me yet, and maybe you can do some clarification on it. Over 700,000 eggs, and you're saying that the maximum capacity is 290,000. You have planted like 500 and some.
This year we got 290 right now.
290.
We're sitting on 289, what we call finger fry. They're the small ones that have just hatched out.
Okay.
That's what we're sitting on at the hatchery right now.
Okay, and the other ones, the other, say, 400,000 didn't work out.
Right. They didn't fertilize. They were either, those eggs could even be what we call overripe, that they're not going to produce anything. They're past their prime. They're not going to fertilize, so we lose. And really, our percentages was from the green eggs to eyed eggs was almost 50%, which for salmon, the way it's been here even like 4 years ago, is really good for what we're seeing out there.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably even better averages than if they were hatching in the wild, isn't it?
It's a lot better.
Yeah.
You very seldom see, it's hard to put a number on how many, especially in the west side. So.
Okay. Well, guys, I want to thank you, Heath Headley and Wade Gerritz, for spending some time with us from the fish hatchery there on Fort Peck. And Captain, again, thanks for rounding up some great guests for us here. And if you have any other questions about salmon fishing, again, Downrigger at MontanaOutdoor.com. Cap, any final thoughts?
Well, I just hope that folks, that they do listen to the podcast, will come out and try to catch some of those salmon. And, you don't have to have all the equipment either. You got outfitters and guides that you can
Good
call
point.
and get connected with, and they'll take you out, and they can get skunked just like I can. But they also do a pretty good job, and they generally don't. If the salmon aren't biting in a particular time, they'll put you on some lake trout, maybe some walleyes. It's a multi-species lake, and it's a great lake to explore the art of fishing here at Fort Peck Reservoir.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Montana Outdoor Podcast. It has been brought to you in part by Superior Hardwoods of Montana, home of the largest selection of in-stock, high-end wood products and flooring in the western United States. Let them guide you through the woods at superior-hardwoods.com. And by Rocky Mountain Truck and Trailer in Missoula, home of Boss Snowplows, CM Truck Beds, and Diamond Sea Trailers. Just go to rmtte.com for more information. So what did you think of today's podcast? Send your questions and comments to Downrigger at montanooutdoor.com. We should be dropping a new podcast this next Saturday. Until then, we will see you soon out in Montana's great outdoors.